I'm really grateful to John for coming along today and to be able to launch our very first Lib Dem Freedom Zone. He's a fantastic campaigning MP. It's a real privilege to work with him, and without further ado, I'll call on John to speak.
Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion, or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech or of the press, or the right of the people peaceably to assemble, and to petition the government for a redress of grievances. And when people talk about the First Amendment, they often look particularly at the freedom of speech or the freedom of the press. But there is another aspect to the First Amendment that is really often very much ignored, and that's the apart from the right of the people peaceably to assemble, which is okay here, and to petition the government for a redress of grievances. And people often ask that we should have a written constitution in the UK. I'm not so certain about that myself, because actually we do, in my view, already have very much a written constitution. It's very difficult to find. Some parts of it sit in the House of Commons library, in the records of the House of Commons from the late 1600s and early 1700s, and if anyone's interested in some of the documents there, again, I've photographed it and they're on my website. There is a Magna Carta is still in force in this country, and there are 3 clauses that have not been repealed. One of the clauses that have not been repealed is basically one that says that we will not sell justice. Well, if you have legal proceedings which basically cost £20,000 to £100,000 on one side, and those are issued against people with effectively ordinary means, and if they want to contest it, they have to risk losing their house. I think we can say that this country does sell justice, and the process of injunction. I spoke to a number of people on the receiving end of some of the injunctions that have been issued over the last year and longer, and it's fair to say it actually is quite oppressive. There's the one about the poisoned water on cruise ships, where there was a painting supervisor who got to find out that the paint that they were taking off these cruise ships was paint which potentially released toxins into the water and poisoned the passengers. And the cruise company, who I'm not allowed to name here yet because I haven't named it in the House of Commons, kept running the vessels with this water that may be poisoned and didn't tell the passengers. And what happened was they then injuncted him in secret hearings, and they put very, very tight constraints on who he should talk to. One of the points about privacy law, confidentiality law in this country, it's based on the law of confidentiality, and the idea of the law of confidentiality is that something is either secret or it isn't. So it's either in the public domain or not in the public domain. One particular concern we've discussed previously of secret prisoners, that is people who are jailed where you can't say who they are, you can't say why they've been jailed, and you can't say who has asked them to be jailed. Now, it may be said by people that this doesn't happen. Well, if you look in The Guardian in the same week as the Ryan Giggs stuff, which was the 23rd of May, I think on the 24th of May there was a story about a case called ZAM, Z-A-M, where somebody was trying to get somebody else imprisoned for contempt of court, and the hearing was secret, and the parties were secret, and actually that one did not proceed, so the person wasn't jailed. Now, some people have said to me, oh, don't worry about it, people don't get jailed in these circumstances. Well, let's look at 2 contempt of court cases this year. Norman Scarfe is a very eccentric 85-year-old war hero who bounces around thinking everything's corrupt when it's only a few things that are corrupt. And he recorded a court hearing and was jailed for 6 months for contempt of court, which is equivalent to a year's jailing. That was in public, which is good. Elizabeth Watson was jailed for contempt of court for 9 months. Going back to Norman Scarfe, on appeal it was released, he was reduced to 12 weeks and then he was released. And with Elizabeth Watson, although she was jailed for 9 months, she again is somewhat eccentric and goes about things in a very counterproductive manner. But being stupid is not really a criminal. It shouldn't be a criminal. Understand about Elizabeth Watson's case that the initial application to commit her to jail made by Doncaster was done in such a way that there was an injunction which said you couldn't name Doncaster and you couldn't name Elizabeth Watson or Vicky Haigh. I have 3 issues with Vicky Haigh's case. One is that Doncaster tried to jail her for talking to me. I think that's a massive scandal. I don't think that's trivial. The thing about it is that is a clear contravention of Article 1 of the First Amendment of the US Constitution. Interestingly, the basic constitutional law in this country, which is the Bill of Rights, which in Article 5 says that you can't jail people for petitioning the King. And that's the same issue, which is the King is the state, so the King has a number of estates to the Constitution, which are the judiciary, and the other parts of the rule of law, the executive, the King, and Parliament. And all of these things which go on are actually very important, and they do affect people's lives in a big way, and they are massive abuses of people's basic freedoms. And I worry sometimes that there isn't the outcry that there should be. The seriousness of the failure of protecting the right to petition has not been fully recognised. There's a further issue in terms of petitioning rights, which is the way in which injunctions undermine the rule of law. If you take the Goodwin one, that information in there was recognised by the FSA as being information they should have had. In the Bro-McGanwy case, the person who is injuncted from providing information to the police. You can provide some information to the police, but not other information. Again, that undermines the rule of law. The question you then have to ask is how many other secrets are there out there? How often, Parliament, when it looks at the issue of whistleblowers, has just concluded we should encourage whistleblowing and protect whistleblowing. But the courts are frequently used, a large sum of money passes from an institution and organisation to the legal system. And the courts are used to stop people blowing the whistle. And we should not tolerate those people in large organisations who basically protect their backs by abusing the legal processes. And the courts should reject these things, but they don't.
John, may I just thank you very much indeed. John, to my mind, is exactly what a good backbench MP should be all about. He's holding the executive to account. And
the judiciary.
Absolutely. And may I say, almost, being almost a sort of member of the awkward squad, and I think that's what a few more MPs should be. Richard Shepherd is another man that I admire, a man who, like John, has spoken his mind and is doing what I think is quite difficult for ordinary members of the public to do. So, John, I really applaud that, and we're very, very proud to be working with you, and thank you so much for coming along today.
These are issues I think the party should take more interest in, because they're very basic issues of civil liberties. But I think what it is a lot of the time people don't believe what's actually happening.